Her sister was stolen. She was wounded, abandoned, believing the city's ruthless mafia boss would never risk his empire for a mere poker dealer. But when he erupted, unleashing a storm of fire and blood to reclaim what was his, she learned his protection wasn't a cage. It was a terrifying, unbreakable claim. Now caught in his dark world, will his obsession destroy them both or forge an impossible love? The clinking of chips, the hushed murmurs of high-stakes bets, and the almost imperceptible shuffle of cards formed Lena Petrova's nightly symphony. The air in the Obsidian Rose was thick, a suffocating blend of expensive cigar smoke, aged whiskey, and the metallic tang of unspoken greed. Velvet ropes, polished mahogany, and the low hum of concealed security cameras created an illusion of opulent exclusivity, but Lena knew better. Beneath the glittering facade, the Obsidian Rose was a cage, and she its most diligent, most trapped bird. Her slender fingers, deceptively strong, glided over the pristine green felt of the poker table. Each movement was precise, almost surgical, honed by years of practice. She was a master of misdirection, her poker face a mask of serene neutrality that betrayed nothing of the churning turmoil within. Her eyes, a striking shade of emerald, usually sparkled with a fierce intelligence, but tonight, they were dulled by an exhaustion that seeped into her very bones. Dark circles, artfully concealed with makeup, hinted at sleepless nights, each one consumed by the phantom tally of medical bills and looming deadlines. Lena swallowed, the dry lump in her throat a constant companion. It was Tuesday, another long night stretching ahead, indistinguishable from the countless others. 7 hours down, 5 more to go before the meager sun would even think of gracing the city. Her shoulders ached, a persistent knot of tension that no amount of deep breathing could release. The scent of a high-end perfume, cloyingly sweet, wafted past her, momentarily stirring a memory of simpler times, of her mother's light-hearted laughter. But the memory was fleeting, a cruel whisper against the harsh reality of her present. Her present was Anya. Anya, her younger sister, whose delicate body was slowly, relentlessly being consumed by a rare autoimmune disease. Lena closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, picturing Anya's wan face, a faint tremor in her hands, the brave, brittle smile she offered even when pain gripped her. Every chip Lena counted, every card she dealt, was for Anya. Every drop of sweat, every ache in her joints, every suffocating moment in this gilded prison was for Anya. The thought was both her anchor and her torment. The medical bills were a towering monstrosity, a relentless avalanche of numbers that threatened to bury Lena alive. Experimental treatments, specialized medications, round-the-clock nursing care. Each line item was a punch to Lena's gut, a reminder of her desperate inadequacy. She worked 2 other jobs during the day, cleaning offices and waiting tables in a greasy spoon diner. The exhaustion was a constant, heavy cloak she wore, but she couldn't afford to rest. Resting meant slowing down. Slowing down meant Anya suffered. And then there was Viktor Volkov, the owner of the Obsidian Rose, a man whose smile was as thin and sharp as a razor, and whose eyes, even when he pretended warmth, were colder than the deepest winter. Volkov was Lena's primary tormentor, her inescapable demon. He had graciously lent her the initial capital for Anya's first, desperate round of treatment, a loan with exorbitant interest rates that seemed to multiply with each passing week. He thrived on fear, on control, and Lena was a prime example of his twisted dominion. She still remembered the first time she'd met him, after she'd exhausted every other avenue, every family friend, every bank. His office, a room of dark wood and gleaming chrome, felt like a predator's lair. He'd offered her a glass of chilled water, his voice smooth as silk, his gaze assessing, dissecting. "Petrova, you're a talented girl. Wasting your youth in the shadows." He had known everything about her, about Anya, about the precise, devastating amount of debt her dying mother had left. "I can help you," he purred, the words dripping with honeyed poison. For a price. That price was her soul, Lena thought grimly, dealing another round of cards. It was the constant anxiety, the relentless pressure, the knowledge that her sister's life literally hung by a thread Volkov held firmly in his cruel hand. He owned her body and soul. He owned her future. And with each passing day, the knot of despair tightened around her chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to hope. A player at her table, a corpulent man with too much cologne and not enough luck, slammed his fist down. "Fold. This damn table is cursed," he bellowed, his voice momentarily cutting through the control. Then Lena offered a polite, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Cursed, she thought. You have no idea. She yearned for a quiet life, for the simple joy of cooking a meal for Anya without calculating every penny, for the luxury of a full night's sleep. But those were dreams for another lifetime, another girl. This Lena, the one standing under the oppressive glamour of the Obsidian Rose, was simply a survivor. A pawn in a game far larger and far more deadly than any she dealt at the poker table. As the clock crept towards midnight, a ripple went through the main floor. A hush fell over some of the tables, a collective intake of breath. Lena felt a prickle of unease on her skin. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. She could feel his presence, a seismic shift in the predatory ecosystem of the Obsidian Rose. A new, more dangerous player had just walked through the doors. The Shadow King was here, and Lena, trapped by debt and desperate hope, had no idea just how fatally entwined her world was about to become with his. Her heart, already a bruised, weary thing, began to beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A sudden, almost imperceptible hush rippled through the Obsidian Rose. It wasn't the silence of anticipation before a winning hand, but something far more primal, a stillness born of instinctive fear. Lena felt it before she saw it, a shift in the very air, growing colder, heavier, charged with an undeniable, dangerous energy. Her spine straightened involuntarily, a prickle of unease tracing a path up her neck. Then he appeared. Not a grand entrance with spotlights and fanfare, but a subtle materialization from the shadows near the exclusive VIP section, as if he had simply willed himself into existence. Dante Alighieri. The name itself was a whisper of dread and reverence, spoken only in hushed tones across the city's underbelly. The Shadow King. Lena had heard the rumors, of course, of his ruthlessness, his impenetrable network, his chilling calm even amidst chaos. But rumors, she now realized, were a pale imitation of the man himself. He moved with a predator's grace, every step deliberate, yet fluid. His tailored suit, a shade darker than midnight, seemed to absorb the ambient light, making him appear almost ethereal, yet undeniably solid, a dark monument of power. His posture was impeccable, a testament to unyielding control. As he walked, heads turned, conversations died, and even the most hardened enforcers scattered around the club seemed to subtly adjust their stances, a silent acknowledgement of his supreme authority. Lena's gaze, against her better judgment, was drawn to his face. Sharp, chiseled features, a jawline that spoke of iron will, and lips that, even in repose, held a hint of a dangerous, knowing curve. But it was his eyes that truly held her captive. Dark, fathomless pools that seemed to absorb all light. They swept across the room with a terrifying precision, missing nothing. When they briefly flickered over Lena's table, a cold shiver, completely unrelated to the club's air conditioning, ran down her arms. She felt utterly exposed, as if he could see every sleepless night, every desperate calculation, every secret fear tucked away in her heart. Viktor Volkov, who had been laughing boisterously at the main bar only moments before, now stood rigid, his usual smugness replaced by a taut mask of forced cordiality. He made his way towards Dante, a performance of deference for all to see. Dante, my friend, Volkov's voice, usually so confident, was laced with an uncharacteristic strain. What an unexpected pleasure. To what do we owe this honor? Dante offered no smile, no handshake. His gaze was a silent command that cut through Volkov's feigned pleasantries. A game, Victor. A high-stakes game. Your best table, your best dealer. His eyes, dark and heavy, settled directly on Lena, who was still frozen behind her table, clutching the deck of cards with white-knuckled intensity. Volkov, catching the unspoken directive, forced another plastic smile. Of course, of course. Petrova, clear the table. Get ready for our esteemed guest. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and a strange, unwelcome surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just another game. This was a battlefield, and she was positioned right in the crosshairs. As she deftly cleared the felt, replacing it with a fresh setup, she felt the weight of Dante's gaze, a palpable pressure that made her movements feel clumsy despite her years of expertise. Volkov joined the table, along with two other silent, stone-faced men who seemed to breathe power almost as readily as Dante himself. The game began. Texas Hold'em. The stakes escalated with breathtaking speed, chips piled high like miniature towers of fate. Lena moved through the rhythm of dealing, her mind a dizzying blur of card combinations and betting patterns. Volkov played aggressively, his usual bluster replaced by calculated, almost desperate intensity. Dante, in stark contrast, was a study in stillness. He spoke rarely, his voice a low, melodic rumble, his commands sharp and precise. His eyes, however, were never still. They analyzed, calculated, and occasionally, they flickered to Lena, a silent interrogation that left her breathless. The tension in the air was so thick, it felt as though it could be cut with one of Dante's rumored obsidian daggers. Lena felt a bead of sweat trickle down her temple, carefully avoiding the player's notice. This wasn't just about money. It was about pride, territory, and a terrifying display of dominance. She could feel the subtle currents of power shifting, the silent war being waged right under her hands. Then it happened. In the third round, with a truly colossal pot on the line, Volkov's hand dipped beneath the table as he shuffled his own cards, a practiced, almost invisible flick of his wrist. Lena's breath hitched. A card, a single crucial card, was exchanged from his sleeve. A perfect, devastating sleight of hand. It was quick, so quick that anyone not looking for it would miss it entirely. But Lena, with her years of experience spotting such tricks, saw it. Her heart leaped into her throat, a cold dread seizing her. Her fingers, usually so steady, faltered for a microsecond, a barely perceptible hesitation as she reached for the next card to deal. Her gaze, wide with shock and a sudden, terrifying realization, involuntarily shot up, directly across the table. Her emerald eyes locked onto Dante Alighieri's. In that instant, the world narrowed. The clatter of chips, the hushed whispers, the distant strains of lounge music, all faded into a dull roar. All that existed was the piercing intensity of Dante's gaze. His dark eyes, like polished obsidian, held hers unblinking. There was no surprise, no anger, no accusation in them. Only a profound, chilling understanding. He had seen it too. He had seen her seeing it. And in that silent exchange, Lena knew, with a certainty that turned her blood to ice, that her life had just taken an irrevocable, terrifying turn. She recovered almost instantly, her training kicking in, dealing the next card with a practiced, seamless motion. But the damage was done. The knowledge, a burning coal in her stomach, churned within her. She was now an unwitting witness, a dangerous secret keeper. Volkov, oblivious to the silent communication, smirked, confident in his manipulated hand. The betting continued, Volkov pushing hard, a triumphant glint in his eye. Dante, however, remained impassive, his expression unreadable. When it came time for the showdown, Volkov revealed his hand, a full house, a winning hand by any standard. A collective gasp went around the table. Volkov leaned back, a smug, venomous smile spreading across his face. Looks like tonight belongs to me, Dante. Better luck next time. But Dante didn't move. His gaze, still fixated on Volkov, was devoid of emotion, yet carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. Is that so, Victor? He asked, his voice a low, dangerous purr that cut through the smugness like a freshly honed blade. Or perhaps, you forgot a card. Volkov's smile faltered, replaced by a sudden, sickening pallor. He tried to laugh it off, a strained, unnatural sound. What are you talking about, Dante? The cards were dealt fairly. Dante leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving Volkov's. Fairly? Or perhaps one too many. With a movement too quick to follow, Dante's hand shot out, not at Volkov, but at the edge of the poker table. His fingers closed around something impossibly small, something that had been expertly palmed and discarded by Volkov. He held it up. A single, perfectly innocent-looking ace of spades. The card Volkov had just used to cheat. The silence that descended upon the obsidian rose this time was absolute, suffocating. Every breath, every rustle of silk, every clink of a chip seemed deafening. Volkov's face went from pale to a ghastly green. He was caught, exposed, humiliated, in his own territory. Dante's voice, still calm, was now a lethal whisper. You cheat at my tables, Victor. You insult my presence. And you believe I would not notice. He crushed the discarded card in his fist, the delicate paper crumpling with a soft, almost menacing sound. This city has an order, Victor. And you just broke it. Volkov, finally finding his voice, sputtered with rage. This is a setup. That dealer. She did something. His frantic, accusing gaze whipped to Lena, who felt a new wave of terror wash over her. He was trying to blame her, to drag her into a humiliating downfall. But Dante's eyes, now blazing with a cold fury, snapped back to Volkov. Do not dare to look at her, Victor. She is merely a witness to your pathetic charade. His words were a command, an absolute decree. No one spoke. No one moved. The power radiating from Dante was so immense, it felt like a physical force pressing down on everyone in the room. Volkov, defeated, slumped back in his chair, his eyes darting wildly, fear finally eclipsing his rage. The game was over. Dante had won, not just the pot, but a profound victory of dominance. As Dante rose, his movements still unhurried, his gaze once again sought Lena. This time, it held a peculiar mix of cold assessment and a dark, possessive interest that made her blood hum with a terrifying awareness. He walked past Volkov, ignoring the man's broken spirit, and stopped directly in front of Lena's table. Without a word, he reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out something small, gleaming. It was a poker chip, heavier, more substantial than the others. Not a standard casino chip, but crafted from pure, burnished gold, intricate engravings of a lion's head adorning its surface. He placed it directly on the felt in front of Lena, right where her shaking fingers had been resting. The gold felt cold against the green, a stark contrast, a symbol. It wasn't payment. It was a claim. His dark eyes, still locked on hers, held a silent message that promised both an inescapable danger and a strange, terrifying kind of protection. A contract had been sealed, not with words, but with a card, a glance, and a chip. Lena stared at the golden disc, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She had just become entangled with the Shadow King, and the game of her life had just begun. What would this dangerous man demand of her now? And what would it cost her to play in his world? The golden poker chip, cold and heavy in Lena's hand, felt less like a prize and more like a brand. Dante Alighieri had vanished as silently as he appeared, leaving behind a battlefield of shattered pride and the suffocating silence of fear. Viktor Volkov, however, remained. His face, a mask of mottled purple and white, twisted with a rage so raw, it vibrated through the very floorboards. Petrova. His voice was a guttural snarl, far removed from the smooth cadence he usually affected. It scraped across Lena's raw nerves, sending a fresh wave of terror through her already battered heart. You saw him. You saw that viper set me up. And you hesitated. Lena flinched, instinctively stepping back from the table. The other dealers had discreetly melted away, leaving her isolated under Volkov's venomous stare. The air, already thick with the residue of Dante's power, now festered with Volkov's impotent fury. It clung to the velvet, permeated the mahogany, and threatened to suffocate Lena. I didn't do anything, Lena stammered, her voice a thin, reedy sound that betrayed her frantic inner turmoil. I just dealt the cards. Volkov's laugh was a harsh, rasping sound, devoid of mirth. Just dealt the cards? Your eyes, Petrova, they betrayed you. They locked with us. He knew you saw. And now, no. He stalked around the table, his heavy steps thudding ominously against the plush carpet. Each step was a hammer blow to Lena's fragile composure. His breath, smelling of stale whiskey and something vaguely metallic, washed over her as he leaned in, his face inches from hers. His eyes, usually cold, now burned with a terrifying, unhinged intensity. You think you're smart, little dealer? You think you can play both sides? His voice dropped to a menacing whisper, the sound utterly devastating. Let me assure you, you cannot. And you, of all people, cannot afford to make an enemy of me. Your sister. Anya, she's a fragile thing, isn't she? So dependent on her big sister's hard work. Lena's blood turned to ice. The world spun. He was threatening Anya. The one line she had drawn in the sand, the one sacred promise she had made. Her vision blurred, the opulent surroundings of the obsidian rose dissolving into a terrifying, indistinct haze. Don't you dare, Lena whispered, a tremor of righteous fury battling against the paralyzing fear. Leave her out of this. She has nothing to do with it. Volkov merely chuckled, a chilling sound. Everything has to do with it now, Petrova. Everything. That debt you owe me, consider it doubled. Effective immediately. And those doctors, those precious specialists for your ailing sister, they have a habit of losing interest when their bills aren't paid, or when certain information about a patient's guardian gets leaked. He straightened, his smile a cruel, victorious slash. Consider yourself warned. You cross me, you lose her. And trust me, Lena, I'm a very difficult man to cross. He turned, his dark, tailored coat swirling behind him, and disappeared into the night, leaving Lena trembling, utterly alone amidst the ghostly clinking of chips and the oppressive silence of a terrorized room. Lena stumbled out of the obsidian rose, the cool night air doing little to extinguish the fire of panic raging within her. Volkov's threats echoed in her ears, a relentless, deafening cacophony. Double dead. Anya. She saw her sister's frail smile, felt the burning guilt of her helplessness. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, about protection. And she was failing. For the next 2 days, Lena lived in a blur of desperate, futile attempts. She worked her day jobs with a frantic energy that bordered on madness, her body aching, her mind a ceaseless current of dread. She made calls to every obscure loan shark she'd ever heard whispers about, every contact, every distant acquaintance. The answers were always the same, either outright refusal or predatory interest rates that made Volkov's demand seem almost reasonable. No one dared to cross Volkov, not after Dante Alighieri's public humiliation of him. Volkov was wounded, dangerous, and now even more unpredictable. She tried to contact Anya's doctors to subtly inquire about payment options, about delaying bills. The answers were polite but firm. The experimental treatments were expensive. Unpaid bills meant halted treatments. Lena could practically hear the ticking clock. Each phone call ended with a cold click, a stark reminder of her isolated desperation. Her small apartment, usually a sanctuary of sorts, now felt like a suffocating cage. The walls seemed to press in, the silence amplifying her internal screams. She ran her fingers over Anya's worn, faded teddy bear, a silent plea for guidance, for strength she didn't possess. The scent of vanilla from a cheap candle Anya liked filled the air, a cruel counterpoint to the metallic taste of fear in Lena's mouth. She even, in a moment of utter madness, considered packing a bag, grabbing Anya from the hospital, and simply disappearing. But where would they go? Anya needed specialized care, constant medication. Running would be a death sentence, a slow, agonizing surrender. Lena slumped against the cold, peeling paint of her kitchen wall, the last vestiges of hope draining from her. Her mother's dying words, "Protect your sister, Lena," resonated in her mind, a crushing weight that threatened to buckle her under. She was at the bottom of the abyss, utterly without recourse. The summons came on the third evening, a discreet, unmarked black car pulling up outside her apartment building. A man, tall and imposing, with the unsettling stillness of a statue, emerged. He didn't speak, merely opened a rear door, his gaze an unyielding command. Lena knew. She had no choice. This was Dante, and he was collecting on that golden chip. The drive was silent, the plush leather seats of the luxury sedan swallowing any sounds from the bustling city outside. Lena stared out the tinted window, watching the familiar streetlights blur into streaks of amber, a chilling parallel to the way her own life was blurring out of control. The car bypassed the usual routes, turning down a secluded, tree-lined drive that led to a towering, ornate wrought iron gate. This was his territory. This was his world. Sharp, chiseled features, a jawline that spoke of iron will, and lips that, even in repose, held a hint of a dangerous, knowing curve. But it was his eyes that truly held her captive. Dark, fathomless pools that seemed to absorb all light. They swept across the room with a terrifying precision, missing nothing. When they briefly flickered over Lena's table, a cold shiver, completely unrelated to the club's air conditioning, ran down her arms. She felt utterly exposed, as if he could see every sleepless night, every desperate calculation, every secret fear tucked away in her heart. Viktor Volkov, who had been laughing boisterously at the main bar only moments before, now stood rigid, his usual smugness replaced by a taut mask of forced cordiality. He made his way towards Dante, a performance of deference for all to see. "Dante, my friend," Volkov's voice, usually so confident, was laced with an uncharacteristic strain. "What an unexpected pleasure. To what do we owe this honor?" Dante offered no smile, no handshake. His gaze was a silent command that cut through Volkov's feigned pleasantries. "A game, Victor. A high-stakes game. Your best table, your best dealer." His eyes, dark and heavy, settled directly on Lena, who was still frozen behind her table, clutching the deck of cards with white-knuckled intensity. Volkov, catching the unspoken directive, forced another plastic smile. Of course, of course. Petrova, clear the table. Get ready for our esteemed guest. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and a strange, unwelcome surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just another game. This was a battlefield, and she was positioned right in the crosshairs. As she deftly cleared the felt, replacing it with a fresh setup, she felt the weight of Dante's gaze, a palpable pressure that made her movements feel clumsy despite her years of expertise. Volkov joined the table, along with two other silent, stone-faced men who seemed to breathe power almost as readily as Dante himself. The game began. Texas Hold'em. The stakes escalated with breathtaking speed, chips piled high like miniature towers of fate. Lena moved through the rhythm of dealing, her mind a dizzying blur of card combinations and betting patterns. Volkov played aggressively, his usual bluster replaced by calculated, almost desperate intensity. Dante, in stark contrast, was a study in stillness. He spoke rarely, his voice a low, melodic rumble, his commands sharp and precise. His eyes, however, were never still. They analyzed, calculated, and occasionally they flickered to Lena, a silent interrogation that left her breathless. The tension in the air was so thick, it felt as though it could be cut with one of Dante's rumored obsidian daggers. Lena felt a bead of sweat trickle down her temple, carefully avoiding the player's notice. This wasn't just about money. It was about pride, territory, and a terrifying display of dominance. She could feel the subtle currents of power shifting, the silent war being waged right under her hands. Then it happened. In the third round, with a truly colossal pot on the line, Volkov's hand dipped beneath the table as he shuffled his own cards, a practiced, almost invisible flick of his wrist. Lena's breath hitched. A card, a single crucial card, was exchanged from his sleeve. A perfect, devastating sleight of hand. It was quick, so quick that anyone not looking for it would miss it entirely. But Lena, with her years of experience spotting such tricks, saw it. Her heart leaped into her throat, a cold dread seizing her. Her fingers, usually so steady, faltered for a microsecond, a barely perceptible hesitation as she reached for the next card to deal. Her gaze, wide with shock and a sudden, terrifying realization, involuntarily shot up, directly across the table. Her emerald eyes locked onto Dante Alighieri's. In that instant, the world narrowed. The clatter of chips, the hushed whispers, the distant strains of lounge music, all faded into a dull roar. All that existed was the piercing intensity of Dante's gaze. His dark eyes, like polished obsidian, held hers unblinking. There was no surprise, no anger, no accusation in them. Only a profound, chilling understanding. He had seen it too. He had seen her seeing it. And in that silent exchange, Lena knew, with a certainty that turned her blood to ice, that her life had just taken an irrevocable, terrifying turn. She recovered almost instantly, her training kicking in, dealing the next card with a practiced, seamless motion. But the damage was done. The knowledge, a burning coal in her stomach, churned within her. She was now an unwitting witness, a dangerous secret keeper. Volkov, oblivious to the silent communication, smirked, confident in his manipulated hand. The betting continued, Volkov pushing hard, a triumphant glint in his eye. Dante, however, remained impassive, his expression unreadable. When it came time for the showdown, Volkov revealed his hand, a full house, a winning hand by any standard. A collective gasp went around the table. Volkov leaned back, a smug, venomous smile spreading across his face. Looks like tonight belongs to me, Dante. Better luck next time. But Dante didn't move. His gaze, still fixated on Volkov, was devoid of emotion, yet carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. Is that so, Victor? He asked, his voice a low, dangerous purr that cut through the smugness like a freshly honed blade. Or perhaps, you forgot a card. Volkov's smile faltered, replaced by a sudden, sickening pallor. He tried to laugh it off, a strained, unnatural sound. What are you talking about, Dante? The cards were dealt fairly. Dante leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving Volkov's. Fairly? Or perhaps one too many. With a movement too quick to follow, Dante's hand shot out, not at Volkov, but at the edge of the poker table. His fingers closed around something impossibly small, something that had been expertly palmed and discarded by Volkov. He held it up. A single, perfectly innocent-looking ace of spades. The card Volkov had just used to cheat. The silence that descended upon the obsidian rose this time was absolute, suffocating. Every breath, every rustle of silk, every clink of a chip seemed deafening. Volkov's face went from pale to a ghastly green. He was caught, exposed, humiliated. In his own territory. Dante's voice, still calm, was now a lethal whisper. You cheat at my tables, Victor. You insult my presence. And you believe I would not notice. He crushed the discarded card in his fist, the delicate paper crumpling with a soft, almost menacing sound. This city has an order, Victor. And you just broke it. Volkov, finally finding his voice, sputtered with rage. This is a setup. That dealer. She did something. His frantic, accusing gaze whipped to Lena, who felt a new wave of terror wash over her. He was trying to blame her, to drag her into a humiliating downfall. But Dante's eyes, now blazing with a cold fury, snapped back to Volkov. Do not dare to look at her, Victor. She is merely a witness to your pathetic charade. His words were a command, an absolute decree. No one spoke. No one moved. The power radiating from Dante was so immense, it felt like a physical force pressing down on everyone in the room. Volkov, defeated, slumped back in his chair, his eyes darting wildly, fear finally eclipsing his rage. The game was over. Dante had won, not just the pot, but a profound victory of dominance. Lena glanced around her apartment one last time. The worn sofa where she'd often fallen asleep, exhausted. The tiny kitchen, usually filled with a meager aroma of instant noodles. The empty space where Anya's bed used to be, before her condition worsened, demanding constant hospital care. A pang, sharp and visceral, twisted in her gut. She was leaving it all behind, willingly stepping into another cage, all for Anya. The thought was both a bitter poison and a desperate, burning fuel. Ready, Miss Petrova? Marco's voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection, a sound that startled her from her reverie. Lena nodded, her throat tight. She clutched the small box of books tighter, the worn cardboard digging into her palms. As I'll ever be. The journey to Dante Alighieri's estate was a blur of opulent silence. The car glided effortlessly through the city, then out into the quiet, affluent suburbs, leaving behind the grimy familiarity of Lena's world. They passed through a series of towering, intricately wrought iron gates that hummed with concealed security, each one sealing her fate further. The estate itself was less a house and more a fortress disguised as a palatial residence. Sprawling across acres of manicured land, the stone mansion seemed to rise from the earth, solid and unyielding, its shadowed windows like watchful, unblinking eyes. Her new room was not a room at all, but a suite. It dwarfed her entire apartment. Silk sheets, the color of rich cream, adorned a king-size bed that seemed to swallow her small frame. The en-suite bathroom, all gleaming marble and polished chrome, was larger than her previous kitchen. There were fresh flowers in a crystal vase on a heavy antique dresser, white lilies, their sweet, heady perfume clashing jarringly with the metallic scent of her own fear. Lena walked to the tall, arched window, pushing aside heavy velvet drapes. Beyond, manicured gardens stretched into the misty dawn, leading to the distant, shimmering expanse of the ocean. It was a view of breathtaking beauty, a vista of freedom that felt utterly mocking. This wasn't a room. It was a gilded cage, designed with such exquisite care that its bars were invisible, yet undeniably present. A young woman, barely older than Lena, with kind eyes and a soft voice, introduced herself as Isabella, assigned to assist with her needs. Isabella explained the unspoken rules. The estate was vast, but certain areas were off-limits. Meals would be served in her suite unless otherwise instructed. A secure phone was provided, with pre-programmed numbers for staff and, ominously, one for Dante himself. For emergencies, Miss Petrova, Isabella had said, her voice gentle, yet firm. Emergencies, Lena thought, or surveillance. The first few days bled into each other, a strange, disorienting rhythm of luxurious isolation. Lena tried to maintain some semblance of her old routine. She woke early, forced herself to exercise in the privacy of her suite, and read the few books she'd brought, trying to lose herself in their familiar narratives. But every moment was underscored by an acute, discomforting awareness of her situation. She felt like a specimen under a microscope, constantly observed, perpetually guarded. Her meals, delivered by silent, efficient staff, were exquisite, delicate pastries for breakfast, perfectly cooked salmon for lunch, rich, complex Italian dinners. Lena, used to rationing and cheap takeout, found herself picking at the lavish spread, her appetite dulled by anxiety. She missed the simple act of choosing her own food, the freedom of a mundane decision. Dante Alighieri was a fleeting, yet omnipresent, shadow. She rarely saw him during the day. Sometimes, a distant murmur of his deep voice would drift from another wing of the mansion, a haunting echo of his power. Other times, she would catch a glimpse of him through a window, a dark, commanding figure moving through the gardens or entering a waiting car. Each sighting sent a fresh jolt through her, a reminder of the lion whose paw she was under. He was a constant, unsettling hum beneath the opulent stillness of the estate. Her first direct interaction with him came on the evening of the fourth day. She was summoned to a different part of the mansion, a sprawling, exquisitely appointed game room. There was alive with the scent of aged leather and fine tobacco. A custom-built poker table, even grander than the ones at the Obsidian Rose, dominated the center of the room. Two men, as impeccably dressed and formidable as Marco, stood by the heavy oak doors. Dante was already there, seated at the head of the table, a deck of cards fanned out in his hand. He wore a charcoal suit that molded to his powerful frame, making him seem both elegant and dangerous. The light from the antique chandelier above cast deep shadows across his chiseled features, emphasizing the predatory glint in his dark eyes. He didn't look up immediately, his long, skilled fingers deftly shuffling the cards with a mesmerizing grace. "Petrova," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble, without lifting his head. "You're late." Lena's heart gave a violent lurch. She checked her wrist, though she wore no watch. Isabella had told her to be there at precisely 8 p.m. She was on time. "No, Mr. Alighieri, I am not." He finally looked up, his dark gaze, heavy and intense, settling on her. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched his lips, the semblance of a smile that chilled her to the bone. "Oh, punctuality, a rare quality in this business." "Good." He gestured to the dealer's seat, a high ergonomic chair positioned perfectly behind the table. "You will deal tonight. My guests are particular. They appreciate talent and discretion." Lena walked to the table, her movements stiff, every nerve screaming with hyper-awareness. She slid into the dealer's chair. The familiar felt a small comfort in the overwhelming strangeness. She picked up a fresh deck, the smooth, cool cards a welcome anchor. "What game are we playing, Mr. Alighieri?" "Call me Dante," he commanded, his voice brooking no argument. "And we are playing for keeps, Lena." Always. The game that night was a revelation. Dante's guests were a terrifying collection of silent, watchful men, clearly figures of power from various corners of his empire. The stakes were astronomical, the tension palpable, yet Dante played with an almost effortless mastery, his poker face impenetrable, his strategies brilliant. Lena dealt with practiced precision, her hands moving instinctively, finding a brief, fleeting solace in the familiar rhythm of the game. It was here, in this high-stakes arena, that she felt a perverse sense of control, a small flicker of her former self. Days turned into a week, then 2. Lena's routine solidified, early mornings of lonely exercise, quiet afternoons of reading or sketching, a forgotten hobby she'd rediscovered, and intense evenings dealing poker for Dante and his inner circle. She learned the unspoken language of his world, the subtle nods, the guarded glances, the razor-sharp intellect hidden beneath layers of polished composure. And then a breakthrough. A phone call from Anya's primary nurse, Dr. Evans, a woman Lena deeply respected but had struggled to pay. Dr. Evans' voice, usually clipped and professional, was brimming with a bewildered excitement. "Lena, I don't know what's happened, but all of Anya's outstanding bills have been settled. And they've approved the new experimental treatment, the one we thought was impossible due to cost. She's responding so well, Lena. It's a miracle." Relief, so overwhelming it brought Lena to her knees, washed over her. Tears, hot and stinging, streamed down her face. Anya was getting better. Anya was safe. The crushing weight that had pressed down on her for so long lifted, leaving her gasping for air. But the raw, incandescent joy was immediately followed by a bitter, complex resentment. Done. He had done this. He had orchestrated this miracle, forcing her into his world, yet delivering the one thing she desperately needed. The irony was a twisted, agonizing knot in her chest. She was grateful, profoundly so. But she hated the debt, the ownership, the feeling of being a puppet on his strings. That evening, a tray arrived for dinner, laden with dishes Lena hadn't ordered, but instantly recognized. Arancini, perfectly crispy and rich. Delicate lemon pasta. And her absolute favorite, a small individual tiramisu, light as air, decadent beyond belief. Lena had mentioned, almost idly, in a brief conversation with Isabella weeks ago, that her nana used to make the best arancini. And she'd once, during a particularly grueling shift at the Obsidian Rose, sighed about craving authentic tiramisu. She stared at the food, the aroma filling her suite, a strange mixture of confusion and an unwelcome warmth spreading through her. He had remembered. He had listened. He, the Shadow King, the ruthless mafia boss, had taken note of her fleeting comments, her forgotten preferences. It was a tiny gesture, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of her captivity, but it chipped away at the solid block of ice around her heart. The following night, after a particularly late game, Lena found herself alone in the dimly lit game room, tidying the chips. A faint scent, musky and distinctly masculine, wafted to her. She looked up. Dante was standing in the doorway, framed by the shadows, watching her. He had been there longer than she realized. "Your sister is improving," he stated, his voice quiet, almost soft, devoid of its usual hard edge. "Dr. Evans reports significant progress. The new treatment is very effective." Lena straightened, her heart thumping. "Thank you," she managed, the word feeling inadequate, yet heavy with a complex gratitude. "For Anya?" He simply nodded, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "She is under my protection. Just as you are." He took a step into the room, then another, slowly closing the distance between them. His presence, even in the vast room, felt suddenly overwhelming, a magnetic force that drew her in. Lena found herself unable to move, unable to breathe, caught in the potent web of his gaze. The silence stretched, fraught with an unspoken tension, an undeniable current that thrummed between them. It was a dangerous, intoxicating pull, a silent acknowledgement of the intricate, perilous dance they were now engaged in. He stopped just a few feet from her, close enough for her to catch the subtle, expensive scent of his cologne. "You look tired, Lena," he observed, his voice still low, almost a caress. "But you are also resilient." "I see that." His eyes flickered down to the golden chip she still occasionally clutched in her pocket, then back to her face. "You resist, yet you adapt." A dangerous combination. Lena felt a blush creep up her neck, an unwelcome warmth. She hated the way his words, his gaze, stripped her bare, exposed her deepest vulnerabilities and her burgeoning, terrifying fascination with him. "I'm just trying to survive," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dante's lips curve again, that dangerous, knowing smile that promised both peril and a strange, dark delight. "And so you shall, Kara. Under my watchful eye." He took another step, closing the remaining distance. His hand, warm and strong, reached out, not to touch her, but to gently brush a stray strand of dark hair from her cheek, his fingers grazing her skin with an electric intensity. But survival, Lena, often leads to much more than just living. It leads to belonging. The words hung in the air, a chilling, possessive pronouncement. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Belonging? To him? The thought was terrifying, yet a strange, almost irresistible tremor ran through her. She was a bird in his golden cage, but perhaps a bird he was slowly, meticulously taming. And she, to her own horror, felt the first faint stirrings of a desire to be tamed. What would that mean for her heart, in the hands of the Shadow King? She had no answer, only a terrifying, magnetic pull towards the darkness he represented. Life within Dante Alighieri's opulent fortress had settled into a rhythm, albeit one dictated by unseen hands and underscored by the constant hum of a watchful, dangerous power. Lena's days were a strange tapestry woven with gilded threads of luxury and the coarse, persistent fiber of her captivity. Anya's condition, miraculously, was improving. The new treatments, funded anonymously by Dante, were yielding results that even Dr. Evans described as remarkable. Lena spoke to Anya daily, her sister's voice, once fragile as spun glass, now carrying a newfound vibrancy that brought Lena a profound, aching relief. This, she knew, was the true cost of her deal. Anya's life, purchased with Lena's own. Yet, despite the undeniable comfort and the easing of her most crushing worry, Lena remained a creature of unease. The silk sheets, though soft against her skin, felt like shackles. The exquisite food, though delicious, tasted of obligation. She often found herself pacing the plush carpets of her suite, the heavy silence amplifying her thoughts, turning them into a relentless echo chamber of doubt and apprehension. She was safe, yes, but at what price? And for how long? Dante himself was a study in controlled intensity. He observed her always. During their nightly poker sessions in the elaborate game room, his dark eyes would often linger on her, dissecting, analyzing, a silent appraisal that made Lena's skin prickle with a mixture of dread and a reluctant, unsettling fascination. He spoke little, his commands sharp and precise, his presence a heavy weight in the room. There were no more gentle brushes of hair from her cheek, no more subtle gestures of care beyond the impeccable service of his staff. He was the Shadow King, distant and formidable, and Lena, his newest possession. One crisp autumn morning, a subtle shift in the estate's meticulously curated calm pricked at Lena's heightened senses. It began with the staff. Isabella, usually bright-eyed and chatty, moved with a newfound tightness in her shoulders, her smile a little too forced. The security personnel, always present yet discreet, seemed more numerous, their movements sharper, their gazes more piercing. A palpable tension, thin as a wire, stretched across the grand halls, humming just beneath the surface of the polished veneer. Lena was in the conservatory, sketching the intricate patterns of a rare orchid, a fragile, exotic bloom that reminded her, ironically, of Anya's delicate beauty. She liked the conservatory. The vibrant life offered a stark contrast to the mansion's brooding silence, a momentary escape. The scent of damp earth and blooming petals filled the air, briefly easing the knot in her stomach. Suddenly, Marco appeared in the arched doorway, his immense frame filling the space, casting a long shadow over the vibrant flora. His face, usually a mask of stoic neutrality, was set in grim lines. "Miss Petrova," he said, his voice low, urgent. "Mr. Alighieri requests your presence in his study." Immediately, the tone brooked no argument. Lena's heart leaped into her throat. This was it. The other shoe. The true cost of her bargain. A cold wave of dread washed over her, chilling her to the bone. She stood, her sketchbook falling unheeded to the marble floor. Dante's study, usually a sanctuary of controlled power, was charged with a crackling, almost electric tension. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken threats. Dante stood by the vast window, his back to her, silhouetted against the pale morning light. Marco remained by the door, a silent sentinel, his hand hovering near the concealed weapon at his hip. On the large mahogany desk, usually pristine, lay a crumpled, half-burned piece of paper. The faint scent of smoke still lingered in the air, an acrid counterpoint to the rich leather and old books. Dante turned slowly, his dark eyes, usually cold, now burning with a barely contained fury. "Volkov is a persistent fool," he stated, his voice a low, dangerous growl that resonated through the room. "And a clumsy one." Lena felt a tremor run through her. What happened?" Dante gestured to the desk. "This was intercepted this morning. A package meant for Anya's hospital room, disguised as a gift from a secret admirer." He picked up the charred paper, his fingers precise and unyielding. It contained a small vial, a slow-acting toxin, designed to mimic the symptoms of her autoimmune disease, exacerbating her condition until it became irreversible. Lena gasped, a guttural sound of pure horror. Her blood ran cold, fear clawing at her throat, suffocating her. Anya. Her Anya. Someone had tried to harm her, to kill her, slowly and agonizingly. The image of Anya, pale and struggling for breath, flashed before her eyes, sharp and devastating. She felt a wave of dizzying nausea, the room swaying around her. "Volkov," Lena whispered, the name a venomous hiss on her tongue. It had to be him. His threats, his desperate revenge. Dante's gaze, sharp and analytical, met hers. "Indeed. He still believes you are a loose end. A weakness. A means to wound me by proxy." His voice was devoid of emotion, a chillingly detached assessment of a lethal threat. He attempted to leverage your attachment to her. A calculated move, if poorly executed. How did you know?" Lena's voice was shaky, raw with a terror she hadn't felt so acutely since the night in the kitchen. "My network is extensive," Dante replied, his lips curving into a mirthless smile. "No attempt to infiltrate my domain, or touch what is mine, goes unnoticed." The package was intercepted long before it reached the hospital. His amateur agents were apprehended before they could even approach the facility perimeter. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. They were dealt with. Swiftly. Permanently. Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Dealt with. Swiftly. Permanently. The words hung in the air, echoing with an unspoken brutality. She knew what that meant. Dante had orchestrated their capture, their interrogation, their ultimate demise, all with the same chilling efficiency he used to shuffle cards. He hadn't just stopped the threat. He had eradicated the source, with a ruthlessness that both terrified and, against her will, instilled a grudging, unsettling admiration. He was a monster, yes, but her monster. Her terrifyingly effective protector. Anya is safe, Dante stated, his voice cutting through her spiraling thoughts. And she will remain safe. Volkov will not attempt such a clumsy maneuver again. He has learned his lesson. This incident merely confirms his desperation. Lena stared at him, her body still trembling, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The image of Anya, healthy and laughing, fought with the terrifying reality of the darkness that surrounded them. She was living in a beautiful, brutal world, where life and death were dealt with the same cold precision as a hand of poker. "This is the world you insisted on being a part of, Lena," Dante said, his voice dropping, taking on a heavier, more intimate tone. "You are under my protection. But my protection comes with its own dangers. Every enemy I have now knows you exist. They know you matter to me." He took a step closer, then another, until he stood directly in front of her. His sheer size, his imposing presence, overwhelmed her. This was a minor threat, a ripple. But the deeper you sink into my waters, the larger the waves become. "Do you understand, Kara?" His hand, warm and strong, reached out, not to threaten, but to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across her skin. The gesture was a sharp, unexpected counterpoint to the chilling reality of his words. "You are valuable to me now, Lena Petrova, and that makes you a target. Always. Your safety depends entirely on my vigilance and your understanding of where you stand." Lena felt a powerful surge of conflicting emotions. Terror for Anya, revulsion at the casual violence, but also an undeniable, potent sense of being seen, of being valued, in a way she hadn't experienced before. She was a pawn, yes, but a crucial one. A pawn guarded by a king whose shadow stretched far and wide. The false sense of security she'd built around Anya's recovery shattered, replaced by the stark, undeniable truth. This world was a constant battle, and she was irrevocably entwined within it. Volkov was dealt with for now. But another serpent, or 100, could always be lurking in the shadows. And her only shield was the very monster who had pulled her into the game. His thumb moved, tracing the line of her jaw, a possessive touch that sent a shiver through her. "Do you still regret your choice, Kara?" he murmured, his dark eyes searching hers, demanding an answer she wasn't sure she could give. She was terrified, but she was also alive. Anya was alive. And in his dangerous, shadowed world, that was all that mattered. For now. The incident with Volkov's poison package had cast a long, chilling shadow over the estate. Lena found herself even more attuned to the subtle shifts in atmosphere, the hushed conversations of the staff, the increased vigilance of Marco's men. Yet, paradoxically, it had also forged a new, unsettling connection between her and Dante. His protection, once a suffocating cage, now felt like a terrifyingly strong shield. He was dangerous, a harbinger of violence, but he was also her only bulwark against a world far more insidious. Their nightly poker games continued, the only ritual in their strange, enforced cohabitation. Lena, usually a master of self-control, found her gaze lingering on Dante, trying to decipher the unreadable depths of his dark eyes. What kind of man could orchestrate such brutal efficiency, yet ensure a young girl received world-class medical care? One evening, after a particularly late game, the last of Dante's associates had departed, leaving the game room cloaked in a soft, contemplative silence. Lena was meticulously stacking the chips, the rhythmic clatter a small comfort. Dante, instead of retreating to his study, remained. He stood by the vast, ornate fireplace, a single glass of amber liquid in his hand, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. The rich, earthy scent of burning oak filled the air, mingling with the lingering notes of his cologne. Lena glanced at him, then back at the chips. Her fingers brushed against the golden lion-headed chip he had given her, still a potent symbol of his claim. She remembered his words, You are valuable to me now, Lena Petrova, and the terrifying implication of what that truly meant in his world. A faint sigh, almost imperceptible, escaped Dante's lips, a sound so unexpectedly human that Lena's head snapped up. She saw it then, a fleeting crack in his impenetrable armor. His shoulders, usually ramrod straight, held a subtle slump, a hint of weariness that tugged at something deep within her. The firelight played across his face, illuminating a faint, jagged scar that ran from his left temple, disappearing into the dark waves of his hair. It was thin, almost translucent, but undeniable, a testament to a past lived on the razor's edge. You're observant, little dealer. Dante's voice was low, devoid of its usual power, almost a murmur against the crackle of the fire. He didn't turn, but Lena felt the weight of his awareness. The scar, Lena stated, her voice softer than she intended, a curiosity she couldn't suppress. It's old. He took a slow sip of his drink, the ice clinking softly. Old enough to remind me that even kings bleed. He finally turned, his gaze meeting hers across the expanse of the room. This time, there was no predatory glint, no cold assessment. Only a deep, profound weariness that seemed to pull at the corners of his eyes. A memento from my 17th birthday. A gift from a rival family. They thought a boy would be easier to break. 17. Lena's mind reeled. Just a year older than Anya was now. The thought was a jarring, stark contrast to the hardened man before her. They were wrong, she murmured, a surge of unexpected empathy washing over her. A humorless chuckle escaped him. Indeed, they underestimated how much a cornered animal will fight. He walked slowly towards the table, stopping opposite her. His presence, even in this softer mood, was still overwhelming, a magnetic force that pulled at her. What about you, Lena Petrova? What are your scars? Lena's breath hitched. Her scars weren't visible, etched deep within her soul by grief, poverty, and the relentless fear for Anya. Living Mr. Alighieri leaves scars on everyone. Some are just deeper than others. She met his gaze, a challenge in her own emerald eyes. My mother died too soon. My father gambled away everything we had, then followed her. And Anya has been fighting for her life since she was 5. The words spilled out, raw and unplanned, a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself. A flicker of something, not pity, but a profound understanding, crossed Dante's features. Loss? It is the greatest weight a man can carry. He paused, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly as it rested on her. You fight for her, don't you? With everything you have. Yes, Lena said, her voice a fierce whisper. With everything. He reached across the table, his hand not touching her, but hovering, a silent, powerful gesture. I understand that kind of fight. He pulled a delicate antique silver locket from beneath his shirt, its surface worn smooth with time. My mother's. She wore it every day. I lost her when I was barely a man. Lena's eyes widened, a wave of profound sympathy washing over her. A locket, a sentimental piece from a loving mother. It shattered the monstrous image she had carefully constructed around him. He wasn't just a king of shadows. He was a son, a man who had loved and lost, just like her. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice husky. He met her gaze, and for the first time, Lena saw a glimmer of raw vulnerability in those dark, fathomless eyes. Sorrow is a luxury, Kara. One I rarely permit myself. He snapped the locket back beneath his shirt, the small metallic click of final punctuation to his moment of shared grief. The air between them crackled, charged with an unspoken understanding. The barrier Lena had meticulously built around her heart, the one that screamed monster, danger, stay away, began to show the first hairline cracks. She saw him not just as the powerful, dangerous man who had trapped her, but as someone burdened by his own past, forged in a crucible of violence, just as she had been forged in the fire of loss and desperation. The chemistry between them, once a simmering undercurrent of fear and reluctant attraction, flared into something hotter, more undeniable. It was a dangerous, intoxicating flame. He leaned across the table, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his gaze a potent caress that stripped away all her defenses. We are more alike than you care to admit, Lena Petrova. Both of us survivors. Both of us carrying the weight of the past. Both of us fighting for what is ours. His fingers, long and strong, finally bridged the gap, brushing lightly against hers as he reached for a stray chip. The touch was electric, a jolt of pure, unadulterated sensation that sent shivers through her entire body. It was a promise, a warning, and an invitation, all rolled into one. Lena's breath hitched. She pulled her hand back almost imperceptibly, yet the lingering warmth, the phantom pressure of his touch remained. He was a demon, a king of shadows, but in that moment, in the shared intimacy of their sorrow, she saw him. Not just the monster, but the man beneath the armor, a man capable of a devastating, dangerous humanity. And the realization terrified her, because she felt, to her absolute horror, an undeniable, potent pull towards the very darkness he embodied. This was a bond, forged in unspoken understanding, that would prove far more perilous than any debt. The fragile truce of understanding forged in the game room was shattered barely a week later, violently and irrevocably. Lena had started to adjust, to find a peculiar comfort in the dangerous routine. Anya's health continued to improve dramatically, a beacon of hope in the gilded cage. Dr. Evans had even suggested a short, supervised outing for Anya, a few hours in a quiet park, to aid in her psychological recovery. Lena, after much internal debate, and with the reluctant approval of Dante's security, had agreed. Marco himself would accompany them, a silent, imposing shadow, ensuring Anya's safety. The autumn air outside the estate, crisp and clean, was a balm to Lena's soul. Anya, pale but radiant, giggled as she chased fallen leaves, her small, delicate hand clutched tightly in Lena's. Marco walked a discreet distance behind them, his vigilant eyes sweeping their surroundings. For a precious hour, Lena almost forgot where she was, almost forgot the ever-present danger. She was just a big sister, enjoying a moment of fragile peace with her beloved sibling. It was during their return journey, just a few blocks from the heavily guarded gates of Dante's estate, that the nightmare unfolded. They were in a dark, unmarked sedan, Marco at the wheel, Lena and Anya in the back seat. The city hummed with its usual cacophony, the blare of horns, the distant wail of sirens, the ceaseless thrum of life. Too much noise. Too many distractions. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light exploded from an alleyway, followed by the screech of tires. Another vehicle, a beat-up black van, swerved violently, cutting off their car. Marco cursed, slamming on the brakes, sending them lurching forward. Before Lena could even process what was happening, the van doors slid open, revealing three masked figures, armed and moving with a brutal, chilling efficiency. "Get down, Miss Petrova!" Marco roared, his hand already reaching for his weapon, but it was too late. The side window shattered inward with a deafening crash, showering them with glittering shards of safety glass. A gloved hand snaked in, grabbing Anya's arm. "No!" Lena screamed, her voice tearing from her throat, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. She lunged, wrapping her arms around Anya, trying to pull her sister away, her strength fueled by a desperate, maternal fury. Anya whimpered, her small body trembling, her eyes wide with fear. A sharp, searing pain exploded in Lena's arm as something heavy struck her. She cried out, her grip momentarily loosening. The masked figure yanked Anya free with a violent, sickening force. Lena collapsed back against the seat, her arm throbbing, a searing agony spreading through her. Marco, fighting valiantly, had managed to draw his weapon and fire a shot, but the numbers were against him. Another masked figure, moving with a brutal speed, smashed the driver's side window, dragging Marco out of the car. The last thing Lena saw before the world blurred was Marco, struggling, fighting against overwhelming odds. Then the world tilted. The black van sped away, Anya's terrified screams echoing in the night, slowly fading into the urban din. Lena, slumped against the seat, her arm bleeding, her heart a gaping, raw wound, felt a cold, desolate despair unlike anything she had ever known. They had taken Anya. Her Anya. She scrambled out of the damaged car, her legs weak, her head throbbing. Marco lay sprawled on the pavement, groaning, blood staining the asphalt beneath him. "Marco!" Lena cried, rushing to his side, her trembling fingers pressing against the gash on his temple. "Anya!" Marco muttered, his eyes glazed with pain and a self-lacerating fury. They took her. Lena's mind raced, a frantic, desperate scramble for answers. Volkov. It had to be Volkov. This was his twisted revenge, aimed squarely at Dante, but striking Lena's most vulnerable point. He knew. He always knew. He knew Anya was her weakness. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her. Darn it. What would he do? Would he even care? She was just a means to an end, a valuable asset, not family. He had already dealt with Volkov's prior attempt. This was a direct assault, a devastating blow. Would he risk his empire, his life, for her sister? For her. The terrifying thought that he might abandon them, cut his losses, sent a fresh wave of despair crashing over her. She was alone again, truly alone, at the mercy of a monster far more insidious than even Dante. Her vision blurred again, not from tears, but from the sickening certainty that she had somehow, in her desperate attempt to save Anya, inadvertently led her into the very maw of the beast. The beautiful, opulent cage of Dante's estate now felt like a cruel joke. Her deal, her bargain with the devil, had spectacularly backfired. And now Anya was paying the ultimate price. The thought was a searing brand, a profound, agonizing betrayal. She felt a guttural scream rising in her throat, a cry of raw, primal anguish that threatened to rip her apart. Anya was gone, snapped from her grasp like a delicate flower. And Lena, broken and bleeding on the cold, unforgiving pavement, felt a terrifying absolute certainty that Dante Alighieri, the Shadow King, would not risk his kingdom for a mere poker dealer's sister. She was abandoned. Utterly, irrevocably abandoned to the cruel machinations of a world she could never hope to understand, let alone survive. All she could feel was a crushing, suffocating despair and the bitter taste of betrayal. The frantic, garbled call from the estate security detail had jolted Dante Alighieri from a tense meeting. The words, attack a perimeter breach. Marco down. Anya gone. Lena wounded, sliced through the carefully constructed calm of his fortress like shards of glass. For a split second, the world went silent. Every muscle in his body coiled, taut and lethal. His dark eyes, usually cold, blazed with an inferno of pure, unadulterated rage. Volkov, that pathetic, cornered rat. He had dared. He had touched what was his. Marco's status? Dante's voice was a low, dangerous rumble, vibrating with an intensity that made the hardened men in his office flinch. Conscious but injured, boss. Head wound. He put up a hell of a fight. Gave us intel before he passed out. An abandoned warehouse district, Old Docks, Pier 13. He recognized one of the assailants, a known Volkov man. Dante slammed his fist onto the polished mahogany desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. His carefully cultivated composure shattered, revealing the primal, untamed beast beneath. He rose, his towering frame radiating a lethal aura that permeated the entire room. Mobilize. Every available man. I want them armed, armored, and ready to move. Now, his men, a formidable force of shadows and steel, snapped into action. Orders barked, weapons clanked, the air filled with the controlled chaos of an army preparing for war. Dante moved with a terrifying focus, stripping off his suit jacket, revealing the sculpted power beneath his crisp shirt. He strapped on a custom-made holster, the cold steel of his Beretta 92 FS a familiar weight against his hip. Another weapon, a combat knife with an obsidian handle, was sheathed to his lower back. He checked his reserves, his movements fluid, efficient, born of countless battles. His mind was a maelstrom of violent images. Anya's innocent, fragile face. Lena's defiant, emerald eyes, now surely wide with terror, her body wounded. Volkov had not just taken his property. He had dared to wound his possession. And worse, he had dared to threaten the one pure, innocent light Lena carried. The thought stoked the fires of Dante's rage, transforming it into a searing, unquenchable inferno. He felt a chilling exhilaration, a dark joy in the imminent bloodbath. Volkov would pay. Not just with his life, but with everything he held dear. Boss, the plan is confirmed. Pier 13. 3 warehouses. We're going in silent, then hard. Marco's second, a lean, scarred man named Rizzo, reported, his voice crisp. No silence. Dante snarled, his eyes glinting with a cold, murderous light. We goin' loud. We goin' fast. And we take no prisoners. I want Volkov alive. The rest, they are simply obstacles. Lena, her scream, a phantom echo in his mind, pushed him forward. He had promised her protection. He had claimed her. And that claim, that unspoken contract, was as sacred as blood. He would burn the city to the ground before he allowed any harm to come to her or her sister. The lion was unleashed. The convoy of black SUVs tore through the night, a terrifying blur of speed and menace. The air inside Dante's vehicle hummed with anticipation, the controlled breathing of his men, the subtle click of safeties being disengaged. Dante sat in the lead vehicle, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on the darkening city lights ahead. Every fiber of his being screamed for vengeance. They arrived at the warehouse district like a plague. A desolate, rust-belt stretch of crumbling brick and corrugated iron, shrouded in the cold, damp fog rolling in from the harbor. Pier 13 loomed, a vast, skeletal structure, its skeletal beams silhouetted against the bruised pre-dawn sky. Perimeter secure. Movement inside Warehouse 2, boss, Rizzo's voice crackled through the comms. Looks like multiple hostiles. Breach. All units, Dante commanded, his voice a low, lethal growl. Go. The next moments were a visceral symphony of controlled chaos. The heavy double doors of Warehouse 2 exploded inward under a barrage of heavy-caliber fire. Dante was the first man through, a dark, unstoppable force. Gunfire erupted, echoing deafeningly within the cavernous space. Flashes of muzzle fire cut through the gloom, illuminating the brutal dance of violence. Dante moved like a phantom, a blur of lethal precision. He fired, reloaded, moved, his movements economical, devastatingly effective. Men fell, screams ripped through the air, the metallic scent of blood mingled with dust and gunpowder. He wasn't just fighting, he was unleashing a storm, a hurricane of fury aimed at one man. Volkov. Find Anya. Find Lena, he roared, his voice cutting through the din of battle, echoing with an absolute, terrifying command. He saw Volkov then. The sniveling rat was trying to flee, dragging Anya, her small body limp with fear, towards a side exit. Lena, her face pale, her arm bound crudely, was being held by two of Volkov's thugs, a dirty gag crudely tied across her mouth. Her emerald eyes, wide with terror and a desperate, fragile hope, locked onto Dante's. A fresh wave of white-hot rage surged through Dante. They had dared. They had touched her. He moved with an unholy speed, a force of nature. He dispatched the two thugs holding Lena with brutal, efficient blows, snapping one man's arm, sending the other sprawling with a single, perfectly aimed kick. Lena stumbled free, coughing, tearing at the gag, her eyes fixed on him, a mixture of awe and sheer terror. Anya! Lena screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Volkov. Dante didn't hesitate. He surged forward, a primal scream tearing from his own throat, leaving his men to secure the remaining hostiles. Volkov, seeing Dante coming, snarled, pulling a knife from his belt and pressing it against Anya's throat, using her as a shield. Stay back, Alighieri, or the girl dies. Dante froze, his gun still raised, his eyes blazing with a dangerous, unstable fire. You touch her, Volkov, he rasped, his voice raw with a barely contained savagery, and I will flay you alive. Slowly, piece by agonizing piece. You will beg for death, and I will deny you. Volkov, emboldened by the momentary standoff, sneered. She means something to you, didn't she? The little dealer's sister. Your weakness. Lena, now free but trembling, watched, horrified, as Dante's expression shifted, morphing into something utterly devoid of humanity. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. This was primal. Dante slowly lowered his weapon, his eyes never leaving Volkov, never leaving the knife at Anya's throat. A cold, terrifying smile touched his lips, a predator's smile. You think you found my weakness, Volkov? You are mistaken. And then, with a speed that defied human perception, Dante moved. Not towards Volkov, but towards a stack of empty barrels nearby. He kicked, sending them crashing into a teetering pile, creating a loud, distracting clang. Volkov flinched, his eyes momentarily darting towards the noise. It was all the opening Dante needed. He surged forward, a dark blur of motion. He didn't fire. He tackled Volkov, a brutal, bone-jarring impact that sent the smaller man sprawling. The knife flew from Volkov's hand. Anya, screaming, stumbled away, directly into Lena's waiting, trembling arms. Anya! Lena cried, clutching her sister, shielding her from the unfolding violence. Anya sobbed into Lena's shoulder, shaking uncontrollably. Dante didn't even glance at them. His entire focus was on Volkov. He straddled the fallen man, his fists a blur of devastating power. Each punch landed with a sickening thud, a brutal, relentless assault. Volkov tried to fight back, a desperate, pathetic struggle against the raging force above him, but Dante's fury was boundless, fueled by every threat, every terror, every drop of Lena's blood. "You dared to touch what is mine," Dante roared, his voice hoarse with rage, as he delivered another crushing blow. "You dared to threaten her innocent life. You will regret this day until your last, miserable breath." Volkov's face was a pulpy mess, blood flowing freely, his body convulsing under the brutal onslaught. But Dante wasn't killing him, not yet. He was ensuring Volkov understood the full, agonizing extent of his transgression. He was breaking him. Finally, Dante paused, breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his knuckles bruised and bleeding. Volkov lay beneath him, a broken, whimpering wreck, barely conscious. Dante slowly rose, his dark eyes still burning with an untamed fire, surveying the devastation he had wrought. He turned then, his gaze sweeping over the warehouse, over his victorious men, and finally, settling on Lena, who was still clutching a terrified Anya. The fury in his eyes slowly receded, replaced by something deep, possessive, and infinitely more dangerous. He walked towards them, his steps heavy, deliberate, a conqueror returning from battle. Lena held Anya tighter, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. He was safe. Anya was safe. But the sheer, unbridled savagery she had just witnessed, the devastating force of his rage, was a terrifying reminder of the man she had bound herself to. He was a protector, yes, but a brutal, merciless one. And his dark gaze, as it locked onto hers, promised a reckoning, not just for Volkov, but for the profound, dangerous connection that had just been forged in blood and fire. The fight was over, but the true battle for their future had just begun. The echoes of gunfire faded, replaced by the hushed, efficient movements of Dante's men securing the warehouse. The air, thick with gunpowder and the coppery tang of blood, slowly began to clear, revealing the grim aftermath of Dante's unleashed fury. Lena clutched Anya, her sister's small body trembling violently against hers. Anya was weeping, silent, gut-wrenching sobs shaking her entire frame. Lena pressed kisses into her hair, murmuring reassurances she barely believed herself. She was in shock, her arm throbbing, her mind a dizzying mix of profound relief and bone-deep horror. Dante reached them, his footsteps heavy on the concrete floor. His clothes were singed, his face smeared with grime, a trace of blood that wasn't his. His knuckles were raw, bruised, and glistening darkly. He knelt before them, his immense presence a comforting anchor amidst the lingering chaos. His dark eyes, still burning with an afterglow of violence, softened almost imperceptibly as they fell upon Anya. "Anya," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a low, soothing rumble that cut through the child's sobs. "You are safe, little one." Anya slowly, cautiously, lifted her head from Lena's shoulder, her tear-streaked eyes meeting Dante's. She didn't flinch. Perhaps, Lena thought numbly, after witnessing such darkness, a child only saw the powerful, undeniable safety he represented. Lena, still trembling, slowly loosened her grip on Anya. She needs a doctor," Lena whispered, her voice hoarse. "She's terrified." Dante nodded, his gaze sweeping over Lena, noticing the blood blossoming on her sleeve. "Rizzo, get a medic over here." "No." "And a secure transport for Anya to the estate's medical wing. Have Dr. Petrov on standby." He turned back to Lena, his gaze softening further, now filled with a deep, possessive concern. "And your arm." Lena barely registered the pain. Relief, a tidal wave of it, washed over her, making her lightheaded. Anya was safe. Dante had come. He hadn't abandoned them. The weight of despair, which had threatened to crush her, lifted, leaving her weak and utterly drained. She looked at Dante, her savior, her captor, her dangerous protector. His face, usually so impassive, was etched with a raw emotion she couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of fury and something profoundly vulnerable. I thought you wouldn't come," Lena whispered, the words tearing from her throat, a confession of her deepest fear. Dante's jaw tightened. He reached out, his bloodied hand gently cupping her uninjured cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. "Never, Kara. Never. You are mine. And what is mine, no one touches. Not Volkov. Not anyone." His voice was a promise, a vow, a chilling declaration of absolute ownership. A medic arrived, efficiently assessing Marco and then turning to Lena. The cut on her arm was deep, but thankfully not life-threatening. She winced as the medic cleaned and bandaged it, the stinging antiseptic a grounding sensation. Anya was whisked away, Marco supervising personally, his limp a testament to his own fierce loyalty. Dante remained by Lena's side, a silent, imposing guardian. He watched the medic work, his eyes never leaving Lena's face, as if he needed to assure himself she was truly safe, truly whole. His presence was a solid, undeniable comfort, even amidst the violence that had just transpired. Later, in the pristine clinical environment of the estate's medical wing, Lena sat on an examination table, a fresh bandage on her arm. Anya, having been thoroughly checked and calmed, was already asleep in a nearby room, sedated by Dr. Petrov. Dante stood leaning against the doorframe, his suit now replaced by a dark, simple shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the powerful, scarred muscles of his forearms. His knuckles, though cleaned, still looked raw. Volkov, Lena said, her voice quiet, almost steady. What did you do to him? The image of Dante's brutal, relentless assault flashed in her mind, sending a shiver down her spine. Dante pushed away from the doorframe, walking to stand before her. His gaze was intense, unyielding. I didn't kill him. Death will be too merciful for a worm like him. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, yet Lena heard the chilling undercurrent of absolute ruthlessness. He will lose everything. His club, his assets, his contacts. He will be stripped bare, financially, socially. And then he will be cast out, banished from this city, hunted by every debt he ever tried to leverage, every enemy he ever made. He will live, Lena. But he will live in constant, agonizing fear, always looking over his shoulder, always knowing what he lost. He will become a shadow, a ghost in his own life, perpetually haunted by what he tried to take from me. Lena swallowed, her blood chilling. Death would indeed have been a mercy. Dante's punishment was far more exquisite, a slow, drawn-out torment designed to break a man's spirit entirely. It was terrifying. And yet, she felt a perverse, unsettling sense of justice. Volkov had threatened Anya, had hurt her. He deserved to pay. And Dante, her Shadow King, had ensured that payment was exacted in full. He reached out, his hand gently taking her bandaged arm, his thumb tracing a slow circle on the clean white linen. The touch was surprisingly soft, almost tender, a stark contrast to the brutal image she held of him. I almost lost you tonight, Lena, he murmured, his dark eyes filled with a raw, vulnerable intensity that stripped away his usual guardedness. His voice was low, rough, tinged with a tremor she hadn't heard before. When I saw them dragging Anya, when I saw you fall, I felt a fear I have not known since I lost my own family. Lena's breath caught in her throat. His admission, so raw, so uncharacteristic, shattered the remaining walls around her heart. He was afraid of losing her. The realization sent a dizzying rush of complex emotions through her. Gratitude, a deep, aching tenderness, and a terrifying, undeniable love that had taken root in the most dangerous of soils. He looked up, his gaze locking with hers, deep and possessive. You are more than just a dealer, Lena Petrova. More than just a means to an end. You are a vital. To me. He leaned closer, his scent warm, masculine, faintly metallic from the lingering battle, filling her senses. His free hand reached out, cupping her face, his thumb brushing over her trembling lip. I promised you safety, and I will burn this world to ashes before I let anyone take you from me again. His eyes, dark as the night sky, held a fervent, possessive heat that promised both unwavering protection and an inescapable claim. Lena felt herself drowning in his gaze, willingly, desperately. The monster had protected her. The beast had saved her sister. And in his confession, in his raw fear of loss, she saw not just the Shadow King, but the man who yearned for a light in his darkness. Her hand, trembling, reached up, her fingers gently touching his rough, bruised knuckles. The bond between them, forged in blood and terror, was now undeniable, irrevocably entwined. And Lena, to her utter terror and profound relief, knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that she never wanted to be truly free from him. His claim, his possession, was now hers as well. Was Lena's courage just survival, or was it the defiant heartbeat of a soul refusing to be broken? Her journey from a desperate dealer bound by debt to the cherished center of a powerful man's world reminds us that the deepest wounds can hide the most profound strength. Sometimes the devil's bargain is merely the path to discovering a love so fierce, it rebuilds your entire foundation. This story whispers a truth. Your past pain doesn't dictate your future joy, and you are always worthy of a love that fights for your peace. If this narrative touched your spirit, if it reminded you of your own resilience, please like this video. Subscribe to our channel for more tales of unbreakable hearts, and share your own story below with "I am worthy of fierce love."